Joining us now to discuss BTC and more is Noelle Acheson, Head of Market Insights at CoinDesk sister company Genesis Global Trading. Noelle, always a pleasure. So just want to start off with, what's your outlook for Bitcoin? We're seeing a lot of volatility.
It's volatile, I can say that. If I can mention one interesting thing that I've been looking at, Christine, by the way, great to see you. And I do have to say these are my opinions, not those of my employer, and nothing I say is investment advice. And that is the Bitcoin dominance statistic. And for those who aren't familiar with this, Bitcoin dominance is quite simply the market cap of Bitcoin as a percentage of the total market cap. And understandably, it's been declining over the years as there are many other projects that are growing in prominence and growing in assets as well. So you would expect Bitcoin's dominance to continue to decline. But it's currently more or less at its high so far this year and back up where it was in November when we were coming off of the excitement from the Bitcoin futures ETF. This is a very and unexpected twist to the Bitcoin narrative that I think will have significant repercussions in the months to come.
So why do you think we're seeing Bitcoin dominance? And you know, my sense is that we're seeing DeFi tokens down. Is Bitcoin the safe haven among digital assets when risk is on the table?
Exactly, but there's the surprising part, Christine. You hit the nail on the head. It is the quote-unquote safe crypto asset, and this is a relative term. It's still very volatile. But we're used to seeing Bitcoin underperform significantly when the market is going up and outperform when the market is going down. Here we are seeing it outperform when the market is not necessarily going down. Sure, there are pockets of weakness, but on the whole, the market is not negative at the moment in spite of all of the uncertainty. And why is that? There are various factors at play. What is especially interesting is who is looking at Bitcoin as a safe asset here. We have it appealing, obviously, to the Bitcoin fundamentalists, and this is not the same as Bitcoin maxis. Bitcoin fundamentalist is a term that I use for those who see Bitcoin as a longer-term hedge. And we also have it appealing as a safe asset, this is very unusual, to the volatility seekers, those that treat Bitcoin as a risk asset. We are now seeing they are betting on Bitcoin having greater support at lower levels than some of the less tested assets. This is unusual. And in so betting, they are contributing to that support. Going back to the fundamentalists, if I may, for a second, this is, again, those who value the Bitcoin for its hedge properties, not just the currency debasement and the hyperinflation hedge properties, but also, this is significant, as one of the only verifiably scarce and seizure-resistant assets out there. What we're seeing, Christine, is the highest profile test of Bitcoin's longer-term investment thesis, arguably ever. It's being laid bare with the war in Europe, as you mentioned. It's in which citizens are being denied access to their savings through no fault of their own, and in which central banks, no matter how much we may support the pressure, are realizing that their reserves are not really theirs. It was also laid bare in Canada just a few weeks ago. I know it may seem like longer, but it was just a few weeks ago. And it will continue to be laid bare by the headlines that we have coming, in which the hyperinflation we're seeing in some commodities are going to start impacting the core numbers as well as standards of living. Mm-hmm. And Christine, if I can make one more point about all of this, and this is the light that is unexpectedly being shone on Bitcoin's technology, beyond the hard asset seizure-resistant properties, which I've just mentioned, that stems from a deeper understanding of what the digitization of finance really means. It's a term that we think we understand. It's something that we have lived with. It's the water we swim in. But we are now seeing that the digitization of finance in the traditional sense means the separation of ownership and access. And now for the first time, we have a widespread ownership technology that runs on a resilient, decentralized network that cannot be shut off. And that sounds like something that any institution at whatever level, and even individual investors who care about holding resilient reserves, are starting to pay attention to.
Do you think that Bitcoin is being used by, say, Russians and Ukrainians as a store of value?
Retail investors, probably. The large investors, probably not. We're not seeing large flows come out of Russia. In fact, we've seen the volumes come out of Russia decline significantly over the past couple of days. But we are seeing a significant uptick in in the amount of Bitcoin held in small addresses. Anything up to 1K BTC, addresses that hold that amount and not big more, they are doing the bulk of the accumulation. There is accumulation going on all the way up to addresses that hold 10K BTC, but it's at a much smaller level. And the very large addresses, they're actually declining in holdings. So it does look like the individual investors or small savers around the world, we don't know necessarily that they're from Russia or the Ukraine, around the world are starting to realize that seizure-resistant assets with what's going on out there are an interesting thing to explore.
So I'm surprised that the price of Bitcoin hasn't risen more than it has. We just heard an announcement today that U.S. President Joe Biden announcing that the U.S. will ban Russian oil and gas imports. Oil is skyrocketing. We're seeing other commodities like nickel skyrocketing. Gold is also at near record highs. So what do you think of the whole digital gold narrative for Bitcoin, while we see that Bitcoin is fairly muted compared to these other commodities?
Well, Bitcoin may be fairly muted compared to what many of us would expect it were everyone to just understand it right away and think, yes, definitely, I'm piling in. But it takes a bit of time, and Bitcoin has outperformed since the beginning of the war, since the 24th of February. Bitcoin is up, I may be a little bit out of my data, my numbers here, but about 15%. Gold is up 4%, and stocks was significantly lower than that. So Bitcoin has outperformed. And again, this is the highest profile test of the original investment thesis ever. Do we want Bitcoin to moon? That is just going to increase volatility and perhaps scare more people away. Bitcoin is actually holding its own. It doesn't need to shoot up to prove its case.
Finally, Noelle, what are you expecting out of the Federal Reserve's meeting next week? Widely expected to have a rate increase, though some are starting to say, maybe they should just delay it given all the geopolitical uncertainty going on right now.
Isn't it interesting, Christine, how no one's really talking about the inflation print that we have coming out on Thursday? But I don't really care about that anymore. It's not the volatility that we were expecting. But I think that we will get 25 basis points. I think that if Jerome Powell does not do that, he will look weak in the face of inflation. We all know that it's going to be totally ineffectual, but the Federal Reserve has to be seen doing something. This does point to, Christine, yet another narrative that we are seeing play out in front of our very eyes, and that is trust in the centralized institutions that have been dictating monetary policy so far. We need this trust actually to continue. I'm not wishing it to go away by any means, but it is being eroded. Could be eroded even more if indeed the inflation that we are going to see as a cause of the commodity price movements recently turns out to be something that monetary policy can't do anything about.